back. We're live. I think. I hope. Let's see how it goes. Quickly before I start, Rupert, don't worry if you can't stay too long. It's all good. These will be here up on the page for a while anyway, so no stress whatsoever. It is Bank Holiday Monday in the UK, so if anyone is enjoying their day off, don't be here. It's very bright, it's lovely, it's gorgeous, it's sunny out. Go outside and play, run around, ride your bike. Don't be watching some Grigori Rasputin looking dude talk about spooky magic. But I hope everyone's okay. As per usual with these streams, there is kind of a general loose theme that might not essentially be followed, but I do have a basic idea of what I wanted to speak about today. With the glare on this camera, there's quite a lot of like god rays and stuff, so I hope that it looks all right on screen. I do apologize if it's a bit too bright. I can try and mess about with some lighting, but I can't change the sun just yet. I'll have to wait until David Copperfield comes up with a way to do that. But I am gonna quickly just set things up. Not sunny in Scotland, says Rupert. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, but it's absolutely cracking the flags here. As per usual, you know, there's not usually that many people in these lives, but if you do want to join in, if you want to chat, feel free to. More than happy to let you guys steer the conversation if there's anything that you want to talk about. I can always change thumbnails and titles after the fact if, you know, if a better subject comes along. With that being said, there is a couple of ideas that I had for this stream. I wasn't originally actually going to stream today. It was going to be yesterday, and then I ended up working on stuff a little bit too late, and I had to reschedule it to today. And then I kind of forgot that it was for today, and I was reminded about half an hour ago by scheduled posts that I've made. So I haven't really prepped for it, but that doesn't matter. We can still just waffle on, or I can waffle on at the very least. And as per usual, you know, if you can't watch this live, if you're watching this after the fact, I hope that there's something interesting here. I hope that there's some information you find useful, or yeah, even just interesting. And as per usual, once more, in the description down below, there is a link to the Real Underground, which is my membership page. There's a bunch of free stuff on there, so you don't have to pay, you don't have to sign up. If you want to just go on there, you can go on collections and go on free, and there's a load of free ebooks. There's actually one more getting added potentially this week, a free ebook, which is what I've been working on the past couple of days when I've had the chance. It is a release for, well, a friend has a download coming out, and they asked if I would be willing to put together some mentalism ideas that can be used with this download. So it is a free ebook. I think it's about 17 pages. There's maybe like 6 or 7 little ideas in there that you can use you can use the stuff that is taught in this download for, essentially. And I'll share more about that, and I'll share that itself when it's released, or when I know more details about when it's going to be released. But that should be fun. That will be free, so yeah, if you go down in the description, you look in the free collection, that'll be there. You know, in a week or two maybe. We'll see how it goes. There's also a link to my Instagram down there if anyone wants to follow me. I'm trying to make more content on there. I'm trying to make more posts. I have a few ideas for things that I would like to share a little bit more often, but we can get to that later. There are a few little tiny housekeeping things to go through before I get onto any kind of a theme or anything like that. Nothing too stressful. Just that there are a bunch of ebook releases over the next week or two. As I said, there is at least one free one, and I believe 3 member ebooks in the next, you know, 2 weeks or so, which is super exciting. One of the ones I spoke about, it was either the last stream or the stream before, Psycho Wolf, which is like 5 little small natural routines to do with well, I won't go too much into what the routines are to do with, but they're very interesting. If you like stuff like Uh, if you like stuff with a little bit of a pseudo hypnosis slant, a kind of guided meditation feel to it, maybe, then I think you'll like some of that stuff. And yeah, there's a lot more ebooks coming. There's stuff that I've been working on for ages that are finally coming together. Longer ebooks and stuff like that. There is also a very, very exciting release on the horizon, which is Zodiac. I've been working non-stop on like the system behind Zodiac for about, how long would it be? The best part of, well, the best part of maybe like 7 or 8 months, and then the past few days, the final prep has completely ramped up for Zodiac. So hopefully, if all things go to plan, we will be filming performances, trailer, and any kind of little tutorial snippets and bits and pieces that need to be used, that need to be sorted out. So hopefully we'll be filming that. I don't know, in the next few weeks. That's what I want to aim for, is very, very soon. It depends on stuff to do with, availability of cameramen, uh, not naming any names, but whoever they may end up being, whatever cameramen are available to me, and people who can help me out with that side of things. But I'm super, super excited for it. This is like something I've been excited about this since me and Lloyd first started speaking about it in November or October, when we first started publicly speaking about it, which was on a Black Art podcast episode. I can see Darren with his eyes there. Darren has been helping me a bunch on Zodiac, and he also, I'm not going to go too far into it, but Darren has some kind of like variations on Zodiac, some things, some other cool things that will be included in the release. Something that I'm actually excited about with the release is I've never put anything out before where it has to have a Facebook group, and this is probably going to have a Facebook group. I've already made it. It's already there, so it will do. Just like a little password protected group, and part of the reason for that group is because of how flexible the system is. I'm really interested in what other people's routines are going to look like. And I'm also really interested in showing jams on there. Jams with a few familiar faces and familiar names that you might know. So I'm going to be uploading additional resources to the Facebook group. Hopefully, continuously. If people like it, if people purchase it, if people join up. But we'll see how it goes. Genuinely, I think Zodiac's one of the most streamlined and commercial things I've ever came up with and ever created. So I have high hopes about how easy people find to adapt to it and use it, and yeah. Anyway, putting aside all that boring kind of housekeeping stuff, I hope all you guys are all right. Once again, if you wanna chat, if you wanna make any suggestions about conversation or jams or anything like that, please feel free to in the little chat section. I've got it open on my computer behind this screen just because it doesn't always pop up. It's not too reliable, and I don't want to be glancing back and forth too much and trying to sort it out. But yeah, I'll see anything that you type anyway. Okay. Oh, sorry, there's a fly climbing up this little wire. Go away, buddy. So the original intent behind this stream when I first scheduled it the other day, and which has almost entirely left my mind now, is this idea about why we are attracted to scary stuff, why we love creepy things. I can waffle about this for a decent amount of time, so please feel free to distract me or ask any questions about anything, not just the general topic. I'm totally down to just divert completely. When I was back in college, I studied film and media, and something that I studied quite a lot was horror film. And that involved pretty much watching every horror film in existence, but also watching horror documentaries, reading about horror, and just going into the general kind of psychology behind why people love horror and why it is different to other films. But this conversation doesn't necessarily completely revolve around film. Just the idea of horror itself, whether that is books or whether that is scary effects like bizarre magic, whether it is just the narrative that we use in a trick. I mean, I can't imagine how extreme you could make a haunted death in terms of the patter in the story, but there are some people I know who have got some pretty spooky tricks when used in the right situation. And obviously, once again, this is fairly situational stuff we're talking about. Judah says he's a few minutes behind, trying to skim and catch up to get live. I have a question, and I think maybe related to the topic. Dude, any question you want to ask, feel free to ask. Yes, the first 5 minutes of this were, well, more than the first 5 minutes. The first 10 minutes of this were just me waffling, so, well, you're not going to hear this, but yes, you'll be perfectly fine skimming ahead and skipping to catch up to the live. But yeah, ask anything you want, man. It's all good. Um, where was I? Yeah, this idea about horror and about why people enjoy it, why people are into it, and as I said, it can be situational. But when people practice magic that has a bit of a horror slant, it can either be social, casual, kind of like an intimate, dinner setting, or it can be a full stage show, because I've definitely seen stage shows that incorporated a lot of horror elements, and I know there are a lot of performers out there where part of their character is this forward facing kind of spooky horror thing. Um, and there's varying levels of, campness or how serious they are about the horror. All of it, for the most part, is just fun, though. It is a very fun thing to think about. It's a very fun thing to talk about and to experience and watch. And there's a reason why it's so fun to watch. When I was in college and I studied media and film and all of this stuff, there was a paper that I wrote to do with the ritual behind watching a horror movie. And it's the idea that watching a horror movie is very, very different from watching a rom com or an action movie. There is a certain way we approach a horror movie. We have certain expectations and we dim the lights. If you are watching with your significant other, you might be underneath a blanket or something. There are different rituals around watching a horror movie. It is a known entity that it is a very different experience than watching a rom com or an action or a thriller or anything like that. And there are a couple of different reasons why people love being scared, why people love being creeped out. The least of all is probably the purely just adrenaline element of it. Fear triggers this fight or flight kind of response. It releases adrenaline. This is a fairly exhilarating thing to go through and enjoyable for a lot of people. And there are endorphins that are released afterwards as well. There's also the idea that it is experiencing a safe fear in a controlled environment. People are interested in fear. People are interested in being scared, not to the point where they want to, well, not everyone. Obviously, you have thrill seekers who will do stuff, but probably the vast majority of people don't want to actually put themselves in danger to experience fear. So to experience it in a controlled environment like a film or a magic show that involves spooky effects, scary effects, bizarre effects, dangerous effects, whether that is escapology or vampire theme magic. People like a safe environment to experience these kind of feelings and that psychological catharsis of going through something that would otherwise be dangerous to go through if it wasn't on stage, or if it wasn't your friend at a dinner party telling you a spooky story. And speaking of spooky stories, the idea of scary tales is something that is fairly intrinsic just to society as a whole. Culturally, it is intrinsic. People have told, scary tales around a campfire for millennia, probably. I imagine there would be cavemen out there telling other cavemen about these horrors that they witnessed in the night. And there is this social bonding element that comes with storytelling. Shared experiences of fear, it can strengthen bonds. Even if you're just sitting watching a movie in a theatre, afterwards, you talk and you laugh with each other about which one of your friends jumped, or which one of your friends started holding hands. Um, and even without that social element, there is also the solo psychological element of mastery over fear. There's a almost imperceptible little self-esteem boost that a lot of people get when they go and watch the scariest horror that's ever been released. Um, it is a tool for self-help in many ways. Yeah, and if it is a live show, that's still the same. It is still a tool for self-help. And things that are traditionally viewed as scary or creepy, there's a different type of cognitive engagement when watching them. Whether that is the problem solving element, in like a thriller horror or something like that, whether that is just keeping up with the plot twists, or there is a lot. You're cognitively engaged a lot differently than when you're watching a rom com, and exactly the same when it is a magic effect. You're cognitively engaged a lot differently than if there is than if there isn't this framing story around the effect. It lets you view the effect through almost a completely different lens. I have seen effects, I've seen magic tricks that are exactly the same, and the only difference is that someone told a really good scary story around the presentation of one of them. And it changes the way you perceive it, it changes the way you experience it in a lot of ways. I mean, it's not really necessarily relevant to magic tricks, but there is this idea about the exploration of morality. When you're telling a story, a lot of stories strive to explore morality, whether that is this is the ideas and ethos that you should follow, or this is what happens when you follow the wrong ideas and ethos. There are very kind of like binary systems at play in horror that we see in the archetypes of the characters, and we can explore this idea of morality in a magic trick as well. And I don't want to get too lofty or too into the storytelling elements with this kind of little waffle. I've done that before in other live streams, and I don't want to alienate anyone who isn't into that kind of stuff. If you are into that kind of stuff, feel free to message me. Feel free to talk to me, outside of this, and I will happily chew your ear off talking about it. When we go to watch a show, whether that is a magic show or whether that is a going to watch a movie, we are going for for well for escapism sometimes. It's not always to simply to witness some entertainment or someone's skills or someone's abilities. It can just be a form of escapism. No, you want to forget about your worries for an hour or two. You want to be transported to a different world for an hour or two. And scary stuff, horror type shows, they they can transport you to a very very different reality, and it is still just as powerful an escape from everyday stuff as a musical is. There's all of that kind of absolute waffle that you can tell comes from someone who you know thinks they know what they're talking about because they wrote about it in college. There is all of that waffle. And then there is also just the purely aesthetic side. Horror is cool. Spooky stuff is cool. Ghosts are interesting. The occult is badass. There are special effects, makeup, storytelling that can be aesthetically pleasing. Whether that is a show, whether that is magic trick, whether that is one effect. There is a purely aesthetic sense that can be sometimes that can be the only reason you're into that kind of stuff, and that's just as good a reason as you know morality and endorphins and adrenaline. Psych Magic says makes me think about how to frame a trick to make the participant the hero of the horror plot, defeating the monster as the card rises to the top. It's funny you say that. I have an effect called Malicious Card, which is kind of like my take on Ambitious Card. I'll put it out for free at some point over the next, well, once all of the release stuff is out the way. I'll write it up and put it out so people can check it out if they want. But framing the participant as the hero is always good in my eyes. I always love the idea of making them the protagonist, making them the one who is magical or the one who is the direct witness to the magical, if that makes sense. But if anyone has any questions, if anyone has any ideas about horror themed tricks, please feel free to suggest them. Please feel free to even just, type a statement. It doesn't matter. Before I started this live stream, Darren did message me one or two little ideas when he saw them. Judah says he has an open question, somewhat related to the theme of this stream. How can we apply magical thinking to other art forms? So it's quite an interesting question, and I always love the idea about transferability. For example, my day job is in the film industry, and I'm working on a horror short film of my own now. Because of my longer history with magic, I am heavily inspired by magical thinking, misdirection, visual deception, as a way to improve the strangeness or horror of a narrative piece. But I admittedly can't quite put my finger on what this means or how to practically execute on it. I thought you and others may have some thoughts, as one who enjoys D&D, horror films, etc. Sorry for multiple messages, there's a limited character count. Judah, don't worry, man. You can type as much as you want. You can type a small novella into that little chat box if you want. There's not that many people. It's fine. You can talk as much as you want. This is a super interesting question to me. I have worked in film before as well. I didn't know that your day job was in the film industry actually, Judah. So that's super interesting. Yeah, I've made a few short films in the past. I've written 4 short films. I've acted in short films, and I've shot short films and produced and directed and stuff like that as well. I have a very deep appreciation for that kind of stuff. A few years back, weirdly enough, a few years back, I had a few scripts that were kind of floating around for short films that got a little bit of interest, and there was one project in particular where there was someone there was someone who was like decently famous who was like semi-attached to it for a while, and then COVID happened and a bunch of other things happened, and yeah, film is a very strange industry, as is most forms of entertainment. But I have a few scripts that, in line with your question, kind of relied on my thinking when it comes to magic for certain elements of it. Certainly practicality in the past when I've made short horror films, even just college films. I've made a bunch of films in college, but after that as well, we have used traditional magic techniques to make sure that practical effects can still happen and can look good. It can look like someone's leg is being chopped off. So it can look like there is certain gory things where I've used my knowledge of magic to approach the practical special effects and prosthetics kind of angle, as well as just the idea of camera tricks. To a knowledge in that does tie in to how you approach the framing, the cinematography, how you approach certain effects, and how you can pull stuff off in camera. But when it comes to the actual art form itself, I do think there's a heckload of transferability. In my everyday, I try and create in any kind of arena. I love to paint, I love to write poetry, I love to, I sculpt, I create magic tricks, I like to film, I like to create non-fiction and fiction writing. And I've always thought in my heart that there's always going to be transferability between any form of creation. Judah also says, that's awesome. My role is software lead at a studio, building tools for filmmakers using virtual production. My experience is on that side, but I'm trying to dip my toe into practical filmmaking. That's awesome, Judah, dude. I knew that you worked on software and stuff like that. I never knew it was in the film production industry. That's really cool, man. That's really fucking cool. And if you are working on a horror short film of your own right now, that's stupidly interesting, dude. We can, we can talk about that as much as you want. I am so down to talk about that. And if anyone who is watching has got any kind of opinions about how you can transfer magic to other art forms or magical thinking to other art forms, please feel free to chime in. I'm sure Judah would appreciate it. Again, I know that there's only a few people watching. But if you are watching this after the fact, if you're watching the replay of the live, even just in the comment section, because I'll take a look afterwards if you've got any ideas around this kind of stuff, any personal little theories about it. When it comes to the why and the question is how can we apply magical thinking to other art forms? It's a fairly subjective question, right? Because it depends on the person, it depends on the creator. um it's usually what I find. um Magical thinking comes into a play when you approach a problem when it is a known problem. So to have an ethos around it just in general is tough. What you're saying totally makes sense, says Judah, in using the knowledge of magic to aid in practical effects. I'm thinking more about the choice in narrative inspired by magical scripting to aid the horror. Yeah. So my approach to scripting has always came from um, narratively from film, from screenplay writing and from fiction writing. So it's an interesting one to think about because my knowledge is being transferred to magic. So to transfer it back is interesting. For example, I feel like lots of Hitchcock movies, says Judah, are often good plots for effects because of the suspense, surprise, and twist throughout. But that's the other way around, lol. Yeah, yeah. And me and Lloyd have spoken a lot about Hitchcock, and the ideas about tension, about increasing tension and raising tension. If I was to think about things that you could take from magic to put into another art form, it's hard because there's so much of what makes magic that cannot be transferred, but there's so much that can be transferred from other art forms to magic. For example, like you say, plot points, the story structure, the tension, elements such as that can easily be transferred into magic. But if we look at magic, you can't really transfer the audience interaction to a movie because then it becomes, a video game or a loose play that is improv based. There are certain elements that just can't be transferred. Narratively, though, yeah, this is a very, very tough one. What can you transfer, even just if it's in the thinking and the approach? My background is in game design, where the interactivity was key, and it was definitely a lot easier to do. In film, it's definitely trickier as it's more passive. I hear you. Judah, we've got a lot in common, dude. I've worked in games as well. Any form of creativity I love. I'll show you some of my old games at some point. Or on the Discord, I can share a couple of random screenshots from old point and click games that I have made. Or, yeah, Jesus, I spent a lot of my youth in really, really just random pieces of software. Even stuff as simple as like Game Maker, which is actually fairly powerful. There's a lot of indie releases that look like amazing that were made in these really stupid programs, and then learning stuff like Unreal, doing modeling in Blender and stuff like that. I spent a lot of my youth playing around with modding Half-Life and Morrowind and stuff like that. And I have a couple of little writing credits for video games as well, besides the design side. So nothing major, but just little kind of indie games. Some of the lore writing or the what's the word for it? Like in a fantasy game when you pick up a book and it's like the world building element of it. I used to write some stuff like that for indie video games. Judah says yes, point and click. Monkey Island is the best. I have my solo game Seek Not a Lighthouse on Steam back when I was in high school. That's dope, dude. Anything I can check out? Yeah, I'll try and find some of the ones that I did the writing for and send them to you. I'm trying to remember the name of this specific one right now, and it was kind of like it was like this asymmetric multiplayer thing, but it had some really cool world building in it, and it was like SCP, and you were like a SWAT team, and it was like against these monsters, but there was loads of story elements. I'll try and remember what the name of it was, but it was just like a stupid indie game. There's a few things like that where yeah, I had some stuff back up on Steam as well. Um, Trying to get funding years and years ago was tough, man. But a lot of my, weirdly enough, a lot of my inspiration for the act of creation comes from books that I've read about video games. Funnily enough, um, I don't know if anyone has ever read, or what are the names? I can't even check my phone to find the names. There's a book about John Romero and the guys who made Doom, id Software. Masters of Doom, it's called. That is one of my favorite books of all time. This idea that these guys, like, stole equipment from their job and created Doom in someone's garage, and just like, well, it wasn't a garage, it was like a lake house that they were renting or something. These plucky kind of startup game companies, I love reading about them. It really helps with creation. From the same writer, I think he had a book about solo developers, which delved into, what's the guy's name? Each chapter was a different developer, and it was about their creative kind of like approach, how they did stuff, how they were skint and they made these things. So one of my favorite chapters in this other book, which I think is by the same writer, was about Stardew Valley, and I cannot remember the developer's name for the life of me. But his story is really, really interesting. Stuff like, what's the guy's name? Phil Fish, is it? Um, he made Fez, and the guy who made The Witness and Braid, I think his name's Jonathan something. They were in a small like documentary called Indie Game the Movie. But stuff like that influences my creativity massively. Um, it's always good to read other people's success stories, to watch other people's success stories. When you are someone who creates a lot, when you're someone who tries to start their own companies, or create their own art, make their own movies, make their own video games, I absolutely adore stuff like that. That's what keeps me going sometimes, man. Load up some kind of like biography on Audible and just go for a walk. Sounds familiar. Fez, Braid, and Super Meat Boy, all those classics from that era. I was obsessed with that documentary as a kid. Yeah, Super Meat Boy. That was the other one. The guy behind that was really interesting. Did he make the Binding of Isaac afterwards? I think that's him. They did a follow up to that movie. I think that was also good. If I remember correctly. I don't know. It's been a while, but I used to love that world as well myself. Really, really big fan. To the kind of original question about how magical thinking can influence other art forms, narrative, maybe specifically. Oh, it's such a tough question, dude. The things that you can take from magic that would influence the narrative of another art form. I think there's a lot you learn about. You know what the thing is? Every time I approach a spectator or a participant, there is this. Sometimes it's almost imperceptible, but you're picking up on cues from them, and you're adjusting your act in the moment to to play best to them. If someone pulls a particular face when I start talking about playing cards, I know to move away from that and drift more into maybe the cartomancy side of it in my approach. And because you have this tactile interactivity, you you shape the narrative that you're telling in the moment based around what your traditional script is. It's so hard to think about how you can transfer that to a fixed, locked piece of narrative. But I do think that there are elements around tension that you can incorporate. Lessons that you might have learned in magic. Judah says, it is so interesting how documentaries about people like that, essentially artists, no different from a documentary on Van Gogh, in my humble opinion, can impact the creative flow of magic creation. Yes, 100%, dude. There is no difference whatsoever. Art is art, video games are art. I have never got that argument. That argument always comes from people who haven't sat down and, witnessed an incredible video game. There are video games that have made me cry more than any book I've ever read. Uh, like, when I think about the emotional, absolute soul crushing ending to certain video games. Like, yeah, it affects me on a deeper level than certain absolute classic novels and classic films. In some ways, that interactivity, same with magic, enhances the art. It enhances the personal connection that the participant can have, because they are not a, what's the word? Well, they're an active participant in both art forms, aren't they? They've got some flesh in the game usually, even that is just the flesh in the game of being in a conversation. Passive observer is that's the yeah, yeah, passive observer is the term that I was looking for. So if we imagined that the person who is watching a movie or witnessing this other art form was a passive observer in a magic trick instead of an active participant, how do you approach that? Well, Judah says, I think that something I've been trying to maximize with my magic lately, making the spectator not feel or act like a viewer but an active participant. It's so important, man. It's so important. It is harder for parlor. It is harder for stage, because it can feel like, oh, they're interacting with one person, but that's not the crowd. The magic that I love is always to one person, or up to a group of, 5 or 6, say. And it is a lot easier to make them feel like active participants, and it is a lot easier to make them not feel like a passive observer. Um, it's always, for me, it's always kind of showing them that their opinion matters, or showing them that they are recognized, which leads to them being invested in what I'm doing. And there's different ways you do that in a magic act. I ask people's opinions a lot, and I actually pay attention to people's opinions. I'll repeat it back so that they know I've listened, so that, or I will make not a judgment, but I will congratulate elements of their character just throughout the act, so that they can feel recognized and they can feel seen by someone, and they're usually more interested in what I have to say if I'm being, if I'm not showering them with compliments, but if I'm saying, oh, you're quite an astute person then, aren't you? You pick up on the little things. They're like, hell yeah, yeah, I do. Like, I'm going to listen to this conversation because this guy's being nice to me. And you can't do that with film, unless you were talking about like freaking metatextual layers where you're hinting that you don't have to you can show not tell, and you appreciate how smart the audience is. Maybe that is something. Maybe there are subtle little things you can do in other art forms that show a respect towards the audience, because in essence that is what I do when I perform a magic trick. I always show them respect. I try. I don't dumb stuff down as much as I might streamline certain things when I can tell the participant isn't going to be interested. I don't dumb stuff down. I show them respect, and I assume that they're going to be interested in what it is I have to show. So maybe there is some small elements from that 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 could be taken from magic. Your approach to an audience. Yeah, if anyone has any other ideas about this, please feel free to get involved. I know that this isn't a conversation that everyone is going to be interested in, but there might be little things that I don't know. A few other people might have some ideas about this kind of stuff. I find it really really interesting. I find transferring lessons between art forms. I think it's one of the most important things you can do. It's the same as if you were going to apply for a job. Your transferable skills are super important. And the people who are really, really good at whatever they can, whatever they put their hand to, that's something that I've always tried to be. Don't know if I've ever achieved it, but I've always tried to be a Renaissance man. I've always wanted to be a jack of all trades. Most things that I approach, I can at least get to an okay level at. Judah says that makes a lot of sense. The magical thinking is less about misdirection and things like that, but more about how you interact with the audience or on film, reference, respect. Hard to describe. It is hard to describe, dude. It's a very, very nebulous concept. But misdirection is still something that can be used. Plot twists exist. You could definitely take lessons from misdirection. They would be more um, they would be more subtle and vague in film and other forms of art than in a magic trick. Oh, look over there. But there are probably lessons that you can take from it. If I sat down and had a think, there would probably be a lot more that I could say on the subject. There'd probably be a lot more interesting conversation to have. So it might be something that's worthwhile discussing in the future as well. If I put some time aside and maybe take some thoughts down and note some things down. Speaking of horror tricks, and just because they're right by my hand here, uh, Darren was speaking to me the other day about a very quick idea he had, and he said it was all right for me to share here. It was just this idea, and I don't have all of them with me. The idea of a blank card slowly being filled with blood until it, you know, until it became the shape of the card itself, or the symbols of the card, the value, the suits and stuff. And I really love that image. We've seen similar images where a blank card will slowly shift into the values, or if maybe ink will slowly turn into it. I was playing around with it the other day. There's so much fun to be had, and this looks kind of cool. This is I made a couple of cards that showed the progression, and you could do kind of like color change routines with them to slowly show this blood filling in the space. But they look kind of cool. So it goes to this. I can't find the face too because I have like a blank one and then one where it was pinpricks of blood, and it very very if you switch them, even if it was just like a twist switch kind of thing, switching them, it looked really cool the way these pinpricks started to appear. So the routine that I was playing with was kind of just like this blank card, and then it slowly these pinpricks of blood start to appear, and then when you put it down slowly, this kind of blood starts to appear, and then and then this one appears. But when you switch into this one, it's like you're dragging your finger down, so it's like smudging it, and then you blow on it and get rid of those and pass it to them. And I was playing around with that. There were some other things, but yeah. When someone tells me an idea and I think it's cool, I end up just having to make a bunch of stupid little gaff cards and props. Judah says that's so interesting. I like that a lot. Kind of like the old Theory 11 distortion effect, but with blood. I'm sure I can modify that gimmick to work that way. Actually, I don't actually remember that Theory 11 release. I don't have too many Theory 11 things. I'll have to look it up. Even two stages of those cards with the simple Erdnase change as you're smearing the blood on the card could be super visual. Yeah, that's one of the ones that I was originally just playing around with, and that's why I tried to kind of get this smear effect because it looked cool when the card came back down and you sorry which way yeah you pulled this. It looked interesting, especially if you had a little bit of blood on your finger. It's from almost 20 years ago. It was a good time in Magic, man. Some of my favorite effects were from them, but I never ever bought too many Theory 11 things. I did watch a few of the trailers, but yeah, I'll definitely look it up. Stuff like this, it would be interesting to make a horror gaff deck. My good buddy Lloyd Barnes and Craig Pettier releasing their new gaff deck. I don't know whether it's towards the end of the year or next year. I don't know what the release schedule is, but they've got a new gaff deck coming soon, and it would be interesting. Maybe it's something that we can talk about in the Discord. Maybe we can, like community source it and come up with a real underground horror gaff deck with just some like weird ass spooky things in. That'd be quite an interesting thing to make. And if anyone has ideas about horror gaff cards, please let me know. Before the stream started, Darren as well said, make something to do with Ouija boards. Which I would like to. I have a few effects that are based around Ouija, but not necessarily that relies completely on a physical board. Some of old gaff decks had those edgy gaff cards, but they were always cheesy rather than a cult flair. I don't remember that particular company's older gaff deck. I do know the gaff deck that Lloyd made with that company. The Cohorts gaff deck, which is my favourite gaff deck of all time. And I'm not just saying that because Lloyd's my friend. I genuinely think that is just one of the best gaff decks there is out there. The trailer for that is absolutely brilliant. Just going through all of them, and that's part of the reason why I'm so excited for his next one. I think I only know one or two of the cards that are in it, but I'm very excited for it. And Judah says, I've been toying with a Ouija board for a while now. Nobody steal this, lol. For a show I'm working on where a compass and a large map becomes a Ouija board type thing, showing different locations. That's cool, dude. I love the imagery of this with a bunch of people on stage still working on what the effect itself will be beyond the imagery. That's really nice, man. That's a really cool way to transfer that kind of that visual. I don't know what methodology you're using behind it, but the imagery itself, super cool. I had an effect called Rat Maze, which is really dumb, but it's interesting, and it involves these cards that go down on the table. One of the original ideas for that was to have it as a pirate map, and when you turn it over, an X marks the spot on a particular card that someone lands on. Judah says it's the type of thing where I don't need to say outright it's referencing a Ouija board, but people will pick up on it. Yeah, there's like the framing, the visual similarities. People will pick up on it. Definitely, I like the idea of. So, are you using the compass as the planchette, or well, whatever you're doing, it sounds cool as hell, man. Yeah. If anyone knows Vince Sagoo from Neo Magic, he has a brilliant effect based around Ouija boards. It comes with these little cards that have questions on, and a Ouija board on the back. I won't go into it too much because it will probably reveal a little bit too much, but it is a brilliant presentation for a kind of traditional effect. I can't remember what it's called. It might just be called Ouija, or it might be called something else. But yeah, Vince from Neo Magic. His effect with Ouija board stuff, imagery is really cool. Yes, the compass is the planchette. I was thinking someone picks a location on a globe, but not much beyond that. Sometimes that's all you need, dude. You need a little spark that makes you put together visuals, almost like this little mental mood board, and that's where you go from there. The other day, I was finishing up writing up this free ebook that's coming out in the next week or so, to do with a download, and the name of the download inspired one of the effects. Sometimes, whether it's visual or just in name, that's all the inspiration you need. Dude, I just made a blood packet card. Says Psych Magic. Hell yeah! What's the visual like in it? Or is it purely like, is it a gag card or a gaff card, or what's the deal with that? I would love to hear about that, man. That was Psych Magic who said that. I don't know if I said. Also, um, I know that this is of interest to absolutely no one, but I made up that I remembered, not remembered, figured out how to do the little white watermark that's here of the real underground, the little PNG. I didn't realize I could do that. I thought that I had to have a certain amount of subscribers to do it, but I made up that I was able to. Just with this being like a kind of last minute stream, I can't promise that it's going to go on too much longer. I don't know how long it's going to be. But if anyone has any ideas or anything they want to talk about, please feel free to let me know. I do realise there's not that many of you watching right now. But whether you're watching live or whether you're watching this after the fact, please do check out the link in the description to the Real Underground. Like I said, if you click on collections on the Real Underground and then free, there's a bunch of free books. You don't have to sign up for anything. You can just go and download them now. Little gift. I like sharing stuff. And my Instagram's on there, so please do follow. Judah says, here's another question. Out to lunch is such a powerful concept for changing drawings content in someone's hand, but it often feels cheesy. How can we improve, make better use of the concept, especially in spooky, weird magic where the change can be really startling? So, funnily enough, I actually have quite a lot of out to lunch work. A lot of it is based around pseudo hypnosis. Some of it is based around spooky things. Um, I think it's the same as any other effect. It is based on how you present it. Jay Sankey has a ton of work with it, but his style I personally find to be a bit more childish slash cheesy. For example, I understand what you mean. That's yeah, that's no shade on Sankey whatsoever. He's one of the most prolific creators, and a lot of his stuff is brilliant. But I completely understand what you mean. His presentation style is very, very commercial. It makes him a lot of money. But there's not much of it that is spooky or has like an edge to it or anything like that. So I completely understand. Dude, I just present it the same way as I present anything else that is a little bit spooky or weird. Um, I think sometimes when people approach out to lunch, they don't approach it like it's bill at work. But it is bill at work and it should be approached the same as any other bill at work. So I almost ignore the fact that there is a gimmick in essence there. And I still present it the same way I would present, any kind of divination or any peaks or anything like that. I actually use the out to lunch principle as a peak fairly often. I don't know. I'm trying to think if I've put anything on the Real Underground that has out to lunch in. I think there might be one or two of the ebooks, but there's a lot more work I have with it as well. Judah says, how? But you mean like how I present things? It's just based around my character, dude. It's based around what the effect is. I mean, if you are trying to accomplish something, oh, using it as a peak, I mean. Oh, well, they don't need to. If I have them write like, I am thinking of, and then the bottom part of it where the out to lunch thing is, they write what they're thinking of, and I turn it round, take it out, give it to them, put your hand on that, and I've got what they've written here in my hand on the device part, and then I can have them destroy that other piece, or I can just pick it up myself. And there's a couple of different routines I have where it's used as a peak and a method, which I can't get into too much on here just because it's like a public open live stream. Oh, dude, that's great. It's such a clean switch. Whoa, I've never thought of that. It's like a center tear where they do the tear. Yeah, exactly. It's a really fun peak. It's routine dependent. I definitely have stuff released on this. I'm sure it's on one of the booklets. There is a out to lunch version of it. I think if you've read Sufferance, I think there's a version called like the Alchemy version or something that uses the out to lunch principle. as a peak, I'm pretty sure. But I have a bunch of other little routines. One of the effects in Psycho Wolf uses out to lunch as a peak and the method, I believe. Judah says I'll have to go back and read the books. Nah, dude, you don't have to read the books. Don't worry. Psych says, Judah, what do you think? You could have a location stabbed on the map, have a blood packet under a card with a cut in it, squeeze, and blood pours through. Psych Magic, that's great. It's a bit too creepy for my style, but I love the visual. Thank you for the suggestion. Have a blood packet under a card with a cut in it, squeeze, and blood pours through. That's pretty cool, dude. Like when I'm trying to think of the exact movie, but I've seen movies where people like stab like Evil Dead kind of thing, like a book bleeding. The idea of a card bleeding super fun. You could use it in a actually no, I won't go too much into that because that kind of reveals method. But there are a bunch of different uses for that. When you said you had a card that was like a blood packet, I didn't realize you meant like that, like it had a squib on it. I thought you meant, I don't know what I thought you meant, but that's super interesting. Whenever I mention using out to lunch as a peak, I I have had people go, oh yeah, you could do that. Why have I never realised that? But there are a bunch of situations where it's perfectly, justified for you to take this card out, have them put their hand on it, and for them to never look at the card again. Say they're protecting a piece of information, or like you say, similar to a centre tear. I want you to destroy that piece of information, put it in an envelope. We'll burn it, or we'll rip it up, or put it in the bin. Render it unto the winds. But if someone is maybe not so confident with sleights around billets, it's a super easy peak. It's a very, very easy peak. One of my favourite things to do actually is kind of retro fitting methodology that isn't traditionally used as a peak. So the, this thing that I've been working on the past few days, there's like kind of a peak element that I've added to it in the ebook, and I'll post more about that when it's actually released. It's just like a fun little download. Does anyone else have anything that they've been working on lately, or any questions, or any thoughts on what not even just what the general topic of this stream is, just any thoughts in general? Does anyone wants to share? Anyone have any ideas lately? Anything they're pursuing? Anything they want to get better at? And thank you, Judah and Psych, for interacting a bunch this time around. I really appreciate it. Sometimes it's hard if there's no one in the chat. I'm filming the video anyway because I want it to be available to watch afterwards, but I find it hard if there's not people to speak to whilst I'm filming the video, if that makes sense. Also, just with you mentioning D&D earlier, and me having the D&D books up here, I posted a little while back, didn't I, for free? I posted a kind of role-playing game to do with magic. We still need to play that on the Discord at some point, just for a laugh, even if it's just half an hour or something. If anyone's wondering what I'm talking about whenever I mention the Discord, it's just like a little private Discord group through the Real Underground. Yes. Okay, dude, I'm noting that you're down for it. I'm gonna get you on board whenever we do it one night. We need to sort out the times though, because I know time zones can be a bit of a pain whenever there's live stuff like this, or whenever there's jams in the Discord or anything like that. We need to try and get a schedule together that works for everyone. Although, a lot of the time I don't mind just jumping on at any point. And if anyone has any suggestions for topics for a future live stream, please let me know. I try and schedule them a little bit ahead of time, just in terms of making the title and making the thumbnail and stuff. So if anyone has any suggestions, I'd be more than happy to put them into the little bag, and I kind of just pick and choose, you know, on the day or the day before what I want to talk about. Thank you, it was a lot of fun. I do have to get running though. I'm definitely going to watch the last stream that I missed as well. Judah, the last stream was 50 minutes of me just like chatting absolute crap. I wouldn't worry about it, but feel free to skim through it if you want to at some point. Syke says, hell yeah, these live streams are great. Do you have any ideas on how to make Out to Lunch spooky? Thank you, I really appreciate that. That means a lot. Yeah, dude, it depends completely on what the effect is. It depends on what final goal you're trying to achieve. But if you used it in the sense of, if you used it like automatic writing, you know, there's something that I'm putting out soon actually called the True Face of God, that goes over a use for Out to Lunch, that is spooky. It's like a creepy one. But you know, if you imagine basing a routine around the idea of automatic writing, you can use the Out to Lunch principle to for some spooky stuff. If someone thinks that they're just scribbling, um, you know, especially if you hold the cards so that this is face down, and they hold a pen like this in their fist, and then they're just drawing, and you make sure they know that there's a band in the middle for them to move over, and then it's like right in place just for you to pull it out with one half of it, you know, where you've pre-written something, whether that is, I don't know, whatever it is. You could peak something a little bit earlier. You could have them write a name, say a name of someone important to them, peak it a little bit earlier and just tell them to keep hold of it. And then just surreptitiously, you could kind of just scribble the name with a bunch of scribbles around it, and then have them just scribble on it. And when you pull it out, it says the name that they were thinking of a little bit earlier. Automatic writing is dope. Yeah, it's always kind of just a go-to, isn't it, for when you're wanting to do something along those lines. But there is definitely other uses. It depends entirely on what the effect you have in mind is. You can't just, you know, it's hard to say, just make Out to Lunch spooky. It's hard to do without knowing what the final goal is or what it is that you want to achieve. Because it all depends on what story you're telling, right? I like using an impromptu haunted handkerchief for ghostwriting. That's a cool idea, dude. I have an impromptu haunted deck, well, semi-impromptu haunted deck that I use for a lot of stuff. But with all that being said, I've waffled on for enough now. I'm going to leave. Unless anyone has any last minute questions, unless anyone has anything that they want to say, I'm going to bounce. I'm going to wait a second just in case. Cheers. Yeah, thank you for joining in, dude. You know what? I genuinely do appreciate it, man. You always show up. We'll have to have a proper jam at some point if you ever want to. Don't know where you're based or anything like that, but I'm always down to jam. Always down to share ideas. Right, guys. Have a nice day. Have a nice night. If you're watching this after the fact, check the links down below and have a good whatever time of day it is.